Hello and welcome to Bonfire Conversations. I'm your host, hamidrezanikoofar, and today I have a superstar composer as my guest. To name a few of his projects, he's scored Call of Duty World War II, Helldivers 2, Mortal Kombat 1, Pacific Drive, and the highly anticipated upcoming game, Star Wars Outlaws. My legendary guest today is Wilbert Roget. In this episode, we delve into Will's success story, explore the behind the scenes of the massive game he's worked on, and discuss the upcoming Star Wars, which is going to have a very different score. We also touch on the highly anticipated Netflix anime Gundam Requiem for Vengeance. Before we begin, please like and subscribe to Bonfire Conversations if you are enjoying the podcast. Thank you very much. Hello and welcome to Bonfire Conversations. Will, this is a very special episode, not only because I'm talking to you, but also because it marks the first episode of the podcast under a new name. Since it's such an important episode, I wanted to kick it off with a friend, someone I look up to and trust. So again, welcome and thank you for your time.
Yes, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So the first time we spoke was back in 2017, I believe, when Call of Duty World War II came out. What a masterpiece of a score, by the way. Again, I've done these podcasts with many people, and sometimes friendships and collaborations are formed after that. However, our connection is unique. We both were in touch, experiencing some crazy cultural and political events like the pandemic, the George Floyd protest, and the tension between our countries, protests in my home country, and yet here we are 7 years later. An Iranian and American composer celebrating music, art, friendship, and peace. And it's beautiful and it's meaningful. So, looking back on the past 7 years since Call of Duty World War II, which was your biggest solo project at the time, I think? And what are the most meaningful lessons you've learned from your work and life since then?
Well, boy, that's a difficult question right off the jump, huh? I mean, I think the biggest lesson I learned, actually not so much from, to some degree from Call of Duty, but very much so on the Helldivers project, which, believe it or not, I started that one not too far after Call of Duty.
No way.
I think I started writing for it in 2019, maybe. Wow. 2019, yeah. 2020, something like that. So not too far away. And the biggest lesson really was there's a certain kind of endurance that comes with being a composer on a score, and really of any kind of long form work. I'm sure that composers who write symphonic works have to deal with the same thing, where it's like you'll find yourself constantly in this battle where you think, I could take the easy way out. I could just, do something that everyone else is probably expecting me to do, or not take risks, or just do stuff in an easier way. But would I be satisfied? Would I be happy with myself? Would I look back on this experience and think, yep, I gave it everything I had at the time? No, you wouldn't. And so you're constantly having to make that battle when the going gets tough, or in all the different ways that the going gets tough in a game score, of course. I think that's probably the biggest lesson, is just not compromising, giving up, but fighting your battles, whether it be against yourself or against a client who maybe has a different idea, and just figuring out when are you going to still just keep trying instead of doing the easy way.
Yeah, and I think what you've created so far will it's such a high quality and a high bar that you just don't want to go back, right? There's an expectation, it gotta keep better and better. But now that you have this amount of success, do you think it changed your personality, the way you collaborate with clients?
No, I don't think so. I mean, because it never really met, whenever you're doing any kind of a score for media, right? You have a lot of things that you have to balance, right? You have to satisfy the client. I think that, in my opinion, is number one, because if you don't, then they'll just reject the cue and you just have to do it again anyway. That's number one. But number two, you have to satisfy the the players, like the franchise. Maybe the franchise has certain expectations. And I think even if you're doing something that's different from usual, you still have to be aware of it.
Yeah.
And number three, you have to satisfy the needs of the game itself, which sometimes can be at odds with, what the client might want, what the fans might usually want. But you as a composer, you're going to know exactly what the game wants. And sometimes it's like a difficult tug of war between those three. And then the fourth thing, which is what you want, that's completely separate from the game, from anything. It's just like, hey, here's like something that I've discovered in the past year that I'm super obsessed with, that I'm not going to be happy unless I integrate this in some way. Maybe it's a piece of gear, maybe it's an instrument you've learned, maybe it's musical technique, maybe you just discovered or rediscovered some band that you absolutely love and you just want to find some way to integrate that their style or whatever it is. But some kind of like selfish type thing, you have to kind of balance all four of those in some way so that they're all satisfied. Yeah, that can be quite difficult. That's always been the case. It's not that like once I've done like a Call of Duty or a whatever else, Mortal Kombat, whatever, it's not like suddenly the clients are like, oh yeah, just do whatever you want. Like, no, it just depends on the project. Some people are more hands-on in different ways. Obviously, I prefer when clients are hands-on with regards to the drama rather than specifics of the music, because it's like, I feel like you're paying me to know about chords and modes and scales, and I don't really understand why they would want to tell me that, but hey, here we are. Nonetheless, it doesn't really matter what your background is. It just depends on what kind of a client that you're currently working with.
Yeah, I asked the same question from Mark Mangini, sound editor of Mad Max. He said, winning 2 Oscars make them listen to me carefully.
Really? Wow, lucky him.
So I always try to talk about inspiring people's big breaks to success, because I think it helps others find hope and purpose by comparing and finding similarities in their stories. Your story of getting into music at LucasArts is very inspiring, particularly regarding your energy, passion, and hard work, which I believe have contributed to your jaw-dropping career to this day. Can you tell us about those early days of trying to prove yourself and your work, and also share your emotions and inner thoughts from back then?
It's funny, I don't really feel like it's changed that much. It does still feel like, constantly having to prove. But in a way, I'm glad that's still the case. I would never want to be, what's the word, complacent necessarily. I would never want to think like, it's good enough. I'd always try to do something new and different and challenging. Otherwise, it's a very boring job where we're just clicking notes. But I mean, before LucasArts, I had done a lot of indie game scores, but this is before the age when indie game scoring was viable, at all. So I was almost like pre-soured, pre-jaded when I got there. It wasn't like bright, shiny lights, LucasArts, hooray! It was just like, this again, But like, it felt almost like, because when I'm on an indie score back then, it was like I was basically the only person involved with music, sometimes all sound. I was doing everything. And so it was from that being like, the big fish in a tiny puddle to like, okay, you are at the absolute lowest of the lowest of the lowest rungs here at LucasArts. And we're going to let you know it, just so you know, make sure you know that you're like nothing below, they weren't like that bad, but I mean, that's kind of the vibe. And so, it was difficult at first, but it was more a challenge of, how do I add value to this audio team that I'm now privileged enough to be a part of? And so that's why I learned more about the implementation side, which I never had the opportunity to do as an indie composer, because it was like, there was no tech, but now there is. And there's resources like over at Industrial Light and Magic, which was literally the same building. They had classes where you could study scripting. So I studied Python in a free class that they just gave out to you, just after, I think it was after work, or maybe lunchtime or something. And it was great. It was like it almost felt like the master's degree that I never got in real life, because it was like, hey, I can come here into work every day, learn something new, um, interact with people who are both inside of audio, but also people who have nothing to do with audio. I had so many friends that were in like QA, engineering, art, and design, and production, and so it was such a great experience to just get that sort of. It was almost like a university degree, but I'm being paid and also making a game out of it. So it was incredible, actually. Um, and then, of course, eventually, I accidentally overheard that they were looking for more composers for Star Wars: The Old Republic, and I just figured, well, I mean, I'm already here, so I should, shoot my shot. So yeah, I literally that day, I wrote a demo piece once I went home that evening, brought it in the next day, and I was like, hey, here's this, I can do this, just like give me a shot, and I'll do my best. And they did, like gave me a shot. I ended up writing about an hour of music for that initial release of Star Wars: The Old Republic.
What was the music for? Was it a cutscene or like an ambient music for the gameplay?
Do you mean the demo piece that I did?
Yeah, the demo
that was
you.
I knew nothing about the Old Republic at all. It was just I overheard that they're looking for someone.
Oh,
and I just thought like, oh well, why not Zoidberg? So I just thought like, okay, well, let me hand in what I think they're looking for. And so like I happened to meet with the music supervisor on a completely unrelated game the next day. But then I was like, hey, by the way, check this out. And then I played it for him. And that's
wow.
It wasn't solicited at all. Wow. I just happened to be in the room accidentally hearing a potential opportunity. And what is that? They say like you miss 100% of the shots you don't shoot or whatever. Yeah. So I just went for it, and yeah, it worked out.
Yeah, that's the definition of luck, being prepared at the right amount, right opportunity. So
yeah,
and being ambitious. So it's so awesome that your career began with Star Wars, and many years later, here we are with Star Wars Outlaws, probably one of the biggest and most anticipated Star Wars games in history. Back then at LucasArts, I guess everything had to be very similar to the original Star Wars movies, and in your case, John Williams. But through the years, I've been seeing and hearing more variations on this beloved franchise. How much freedom did you have on Outlaws to explore a different Sonic world?
Quite a lot. I mean, so when they came to me initially,
by the way, you're a Star Wars master. When you look at your career, you've been in every Star Wars game.
I've done quite a lot, yeah. and it's, again, like, by the time I had finished Star Wars Vader Immortal,
yeah,
I was kind of done with doing the sort of off John Williams thing. I wanted to kind of focus on my own sound at that point. And I'd already turned down one or two other projects that they had came to me, and they were like, hey, would you like to do this? And I was like, I just don't really, I'm not feeling doing like a John Williams ripoff essentially anymore. Yeah. I want to do my own thing. And I have other interests that I have musically that I wanted to explore. So once they came to me with Outlaws, I was ready to be like, I don't have time for that, whatever. And immediately they're like, no, we don't want that, the typical John Williams sound. We want to go like even further than some of the other recent games and TV shows, and really establish our own sound.
Wow.
And so I honestly, I was kind of irreverent about it. I heard that and I was like, oh yeah, well, we'll see about that. And then for my demo piece, I remember like intentionally, I started my demo piece in the most like not Star Wars sound I could possibly think of. The game is about a scoundrel. Yeah, the game is about a scoundrel, and she is, she's a thief. She's going through all these places. She's like wanted criminal, and she's motivated by like money, and then she's shooting people. She's all this. So the very first sound that you hear in the main theme, which was my demo piece, is I took some coins and I dropped them together to get this ching, and then I took the sound of a gun cocking. And I combined them, so it started this like
awesome,
kind of like an iconic sound for her, and then it busts into a trap beat.
Awesome.
So like you have the 808 bass, and that goes for a while, and then there's some like Spanish guitar, and then the melody comes in on electric violin, and it's not a good solid like minute and a half before anything orchestra happens.
Yeah,
and then it has like a kind of a journey to it after that. So there is orchestral elements that that has that Star Wars John Williams vibe, but it's very much rooted in just saying, look, we are Star Wars, but um, we're not going to think of Star Wars as an anchor at all. Instead, it's more like an opportunity. So it's like, here is a piece of music that fits the game, that fits the gameplay style. It's open world. There's a lot of stealth involved, and every once in a while, you'll have these reminders that it's Star Wars, rather than it being like Star Wars copy first and then like branching off. So this was actually great because it offered us an opportunity to do a lot with interactive music in ways that we haven't been able to do previously in Star Wars games. Because if it were just that very classic traditional John Williams style, it's not exceptionally easy to have like a layered system that way.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to have like tempo synced things. It's so orchestral and so classical. But we did it. We have like a whole 7-layer combat system that's constantly moving around and crossfading and doing all kinds of funny music implementation gags. And it's all possible because we took Star Wars as an opportunity rather than a burden.
Yeah, I've seen some gameplay footages, and I was really impressed by that, because Helldivers 2 and now Star Wars Outlaws both benefit from a heavy use of interactive music. So how do you approach these scenarios and implementations? I know you're good with coding and using middlewares like WWII, but how hands-on are you on projects like Star Wars Outlaws?
Yeah, so one of the unfortunate things about working in the sort of AAA blockbuster game spaces is that you are kind of pushed pretty far away, usually pretty far away from the implementation side of things, just by necessity. You know, it's just difficult to bring people in. Whereas on a smaller project, you might control everything. However, on Outlaws, honestly, we co-developed the system. You know, we tried a lot of stuff. I grabbed Wise and demoed stuff for the audio team, and we played around quite a bit, actually. I would work with our music implementer, Eric Jacobson. He had worked on the Division 2, and I had worked on at this point, it's been rebooted like 5 times before it came out, but Dead Island 2. Oh, yeah. I worked on the initial Dead Island 2 and developed that music system. So we kind of like took both of our experiences from those games that we'd worked on and kind of married it into a new system, which is what Outlaws turned into. I think that I probably can't say too much about exactly how it works, but it was basically just the marriage of those two experiences and just looking at all the different opportunities we have for interacting with the game.
Yeah. So how about Helldivers 2?
Helldivers was kind of like Call of Duty in that, I mean, both of them actually were the Sony PlayStation music team. Sony PlayStation music team supervised both of them, and they did all the editing. And they tend to just tell you like, just write us like a suite, maybe 5 minutes long or whatever, and have it start quieter and then get medium and then more intense at the end. And just write that, and we'll get, I deliver in like a cajillion stems, and they basically just reassemble everything themselves. So they'll re-edit it into new cues for the in-game. So you really don't see any of the game. I mean, I barely saw gameplay for either Helldivers or Call of Duty. Almost like maybe 5% at most of the cutscenes in Call of Duty did I ever actually see. And that's just the way that they usually work. They're just like very composer, you stay there, just deliver us content, and then we'll edit it and do that on our end.
It was great in Helldivers because every moment felt like a short action film. And it was like composed for, and it made every battle so atmospheric and like very like a action movie. It was great. I loved it. By the way, we talked about
I think the only reason that that's possible is like, I mean, like there are some downsides obviously with being pushed so far away from the game as the composer, but the nice thing about the way that Sony's edit team works is that they're there with the game like every day, and they're seeing it change constantly, and so they can respond to all of these changes. Whereas like if I'm the composer and I'm sitting here and I've already delivered it, and then the game team is like, we have altered the deal, then it's just like, how many times do I have to, whereas like they're just taking a cajillion stems and they have like fresh ears on it, and they can reorient things, and re-implement, however they want until the final hour, really.
Yeah.
So that's probably why it feels like this is like a very custom scored game, is that like they had that opportunity to revise things and replan for things once they could see what the shipping game would really look like.
But on Outlaws, you were more hands-on and it was more involved, right?
Much more so. And I think the reason that works is that Outlaws is a very systemic music system. I mean, like, obviously, if you're going into like towns or whatever, then like, yeah, here's like the town music that I've written for this. But a lot of it is like we just set up a system and we're like, all right, computer, you figure it out.
Awesome.
And that's why on Outlaws, hopefully, as you're playing, it should feel like this custom scored thing is going through. It's not like an insanely tightly scripted thing, except for obviously like in missions and quests and stuff. But for most of the gameplay, it is like the computer is deciding and making those decisions in real time.
Yeah, can't wait. I know Navid Khovari, the writer of Star Wars Outlaws. He's such a nice and deep person. Did you get to work with him on this?
A little bit, yeah. I hadn't met him until fairly recently.
Yeah.
But he did these great like narrative like talk through on almost analysis videos for me, where he explained like not only here's the story of the game and here's like what goes on, but also like kind of like the deeper meaning. Like the game, I'm probably not allowed to say it, but like there is a theme to the game, which I love. I love when games have like a narrative theme, like something that they're trying to say with the story, which hopefully will be very clear once people actually play the game and see what happens and all. And he really broke that down in a very nice way. And what was really cool is that we did all of the cutscene scoring very late in development, and kind of in like a weird, janky, messed up order, because like, one cutscene might be done, but it's like way at the end of the game, and then this one is done and it's like at the beginning. So all that. And it was great because I could see little tiny details in one cutscene that are actually callbacks to an earlier one, but are informed by the story and the theming. And I could make little musical references, which of course no one will ever notice. But like from my perspective, in terms of constructing the cutscene music, it was very useful to be able to make that connection and have the whole thing just sort of make musical sense as a cohesion unit.
Wow. I really can't wait for it. So I've been seeing a noticeable evolution in the way game engines handle sound. Before, they were mostly focused on visuals and the way codes work, but now, for example, Unreal Engine 5 teamed up with Sweet Justice to basically make the audio integration of Unreal Engine so advanced that you wouldn't need WWIIs or Fmod for a professional audio system. Do you think in the future we'll see more unified way of making and implementing audio in games?
Well, so the problem with unification is that every game deserves a very special treatment of audio.
Yeah.
Every game needs something that's like that basically reinforces the pillars of the game itself. So like, for example, on the Avatar game, also done by Massive, they have this very elaborate system of ray tracing in order to make sure that everything has just the perfect reverb and the perfect mix, no matter where you are. They have like a cajillion emitters out there in the world. And it sounds brilliant as a result. Our game is a little bit more on the cinematic side. And so a lot of it was like an offline kind of sound design philosophy, I guess, where it's not necessarily like the hip, modern, crisp sound that you hear in a lot of games, but instead it has this sort of like, it almost feels like you're putting in your well-preserved 1980s Star Wars Empire Strike Back VHS into the VCR. And like, it's like a cleaner version of that. Like, it's just an aesthetic to it. But a lot of work goes into that, both on the asset creation level and on the mix level. We have tools like Wise because they're a great sort of first step, and saying like, okay, well, this Wise system will be like the base layer, but every single game has something that they're adding to it. There's a reason why we have audio programmers, and every single game does something in order to just add to what Wise gives as that base layer. So I don't necessarily think that it's possible really to have like one unchanged audio engine that just works for everyone and everyone just whatever. I think we're always, even if we're all using Wise, we're all still going to kind of like manipulate it and bend it to our will according to whatever game we're working on.
I agree exactly. Just like the visuals, that every engine is different and makes it unique from
For sure.
apart from other games. I love it when people do experiment on crazy ideas for audio. You mentioned Avatar again from Massive. I had Alex Riviere, audio director of that game, on the podcast. Did you get to work with him?
Yeah. No, I mean, like I don't know how they pull it off, but the Massive, they're pretty separate.
Yeah.
Which is like, okay, so you're at the same time doing two gigantic games. How is that possible? But somehow they do. And so like, yeah, they were kind of off in their own world, and we were sort of off in our own world here in Star Wars. And somehow both games are going to come out.
Yeah. So. Great team. Yeah. So speaking of Unreal Engine, how badass is Gundam Requiem for Vengeance, a Netflix animation made in UE5, if I'm correct, composed by the great Wilbert Roget. I knew about your love of Japanese games and animations, and such project was bound to happen. What can you tell us about it?
I wouldn't say it was bound to happen, because a lot of very random luck led to that. But yeah, it was a great sort of passion project for sure. I wasn't, if I'm going to be very honest, I wasn't necessarily that intimidated going into like Mortal Kombat or Helldivers or even Star Wars Outlaws. I mean, because I'd already done several Star Wars scores, but going into Gundam was terrifying, because I looked at the history of Gundam and the composers, and basically all of my favorite Japanese composers had done a Gundam, including literally my favorite composer in the world, which is Yoko Kanno. And she did Turn A Gundam. And I listened to like 5 seconds of that, and I was like, I can't do this. There's no way. This is going to be there's no way I can measure up to anywhere near that. But, I had an incredible sound producer, Hiroaki Yura. And we had been friends for years, actually. And he basically said, I want you on this project, and I think you're going to do a good job. And that's all there is to it.
Yeah.
And he had a ton of faith in me. There's a lot more. It's interesting. Like the way anime usually works is you don't really score to picture. Instead, you get like a big list of cues that aren't really supposed to be synced to anything. It's just like, we'll probably need a battle cue like this, and then a desperate battle cue, and then like people lounging around cue, and then we're going to need, like they just get a big old list, and you just write each of those, and they're like, okay, cool. And then the music editor will put that and like chop things up and put it wherever they want. We actually didn't do it that way for this, because it was just it was a more difficult, like the way that the director had put the show together, Erasmus Brostow, it just didn't really make sense to do that. So it made more sense for me to custom score. And they were just very surprisingly open with different musical styles, and just using instrumentation that wasn't ordinary, I guess I could say. Like I got away with so many different things that I don't think I would have been able to get away with if it were a Western, video game. So for example, like you turn on the show, and we've heard this cue in some of the trailers. The first thing you hear is a Ukrainian vocalist, singing just solo. She's not singing any actual words. It's just like gibberish that I made up, but like, because it's sci-fi in the future. So I was like, why would I? But she sings so beautifully. And then it's sort of an orchestral, like very calm, very peaceful, but it's like war.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to show that. I wanted to write music for the beauty of like the worlds that they were in. So I had a couple of Ukrainian musicians, Finnish musicians, a friend of mine from Ireland who plays a lot of different solo instruments, and the orchestra we recorded in Sydney Australia, Eminence Symphony Orchestra, and yeah, they all came together. They just performed so beautifully, and it was way more freedom creatively than I think I'd ever enjoyed before. So I am very interested in working again in Japanese anime and video games, because it was just like such an eye-opening experience just to be able to look at a scene and just think like, I don't have to worry about stereotypes anymore or
Yeah.
like expectation. All they care about is the vibe going to be correct? And they're so used to, interesting harmonies, interesting instrumentation, that there's nothing really I can do that will surprise them. I just have to make sure that the vibe is correct. They're big on melody as well. They really want melodies to be clear. And as long as that's satisfied, then yeah, they're like, great, thank you. And it was a great experience as a result.
Yeah. Surely it's gonna be something different since they brought an American composer for it. They're trying different things. Would you say that?
Yeah,
uh,
I was surprised too. Apparently, that is starting to be less uncommon working with Western composers. They are showing interest, which I'm very flattered. I think I am actually the first non-Japanese Gundam composer, which is insane. This is like a 1979 franchise, however many years that is. Funny story. Ko Otani, who did the music to Gundam Wing and also Shadow of the Colossus, which I'm more familiar with, he was actually at the same orchestra session that I was
Wow.
recording for Gundam in Sydney. So I got to hear some of his new music, which is absolutely gorgeous and haunting and beautiful. And then he was hearing my music for Gundam, which was terrifying, having like the actual
I
Gundam
bet.
composer in the room. You're just like sitting like, what is he gonna? But no, he was extremely nice. I think he told me like, your music sounds more Japanese than anything I've heard, which is like, what? I don't know how that works, but I'll take it as a compliment. Yeah. And yeah, he's incredibly friendly and obviously one of my favorite composers in the world. Um, so it was so encouraging to have him there for sure.
Wow. When does it come out? End of 2024?
Yeah, we actually just today or yesterday did our launch date trailer.
Yeah.
So that's all on YouTube and on Twitter. So it premieres on Netflix October 17th.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. Can't wait for that. So,
Yeah.
uh, what games have you been playing recently that piqued your interest regarding music?
Well,
Did you have
I
time?
would say this entire year. So the way I play video games is kind of sad, but like I only have like 10, 15 minutes
I
at
know.
a time to do anything. Um, so I tried to play Helldivers, but I'm only at like level 13 after all this time because I just
Yeah.
never have enough time to do that. But it's super fun. I love playing it. But as far as music, I finally beat Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, this
Yeah.
part two of the remake series. It is unbelievably good musically. I mean, it's astonishing. Like it's what happens when you just give the music team a blank check and say like, just go off and write the best soundtrack that
Yeah.
like we've ever heard in our entire life. And they did. It's unbelievably good and huge. I mean, the album is like 7 CDs, and that only scratches the surface. It's just astronomical amounts of music in this game, and the game itself is gigantic. It took me like 100 something hours to beat it. It's I'm still blown away by like how just massive and how great the game was. So yeah, that was like my main thing this year, and I just started the Elden Ring DLC,
Yeah.
Shadow of the Erd Tree, which is also incredible. Obviously it's Elden Ring, so the music is not quite as like wham in your face as like
Yeah.
a Final Fantasy, but I mean I love that FromSoft dark fantasy style,
Yeah.
and so far the music has been really cool in this one as well.
Yeah. Last night I started playing Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3. It came out on Game
Oh
Pass, and
yeah.
I got to try it. Played it like half an hour. But while playing, I was interested to know your opinion about Call of Duties after World War II regarding music. What do you think? Have you got to play any of them, and what do you think?
I definitely played Sarah Schachner's Modern Warfare 1 and Infinite Warfare.
Yeah.
I think I played Modern Warfare 2.
Yeah.
Was there a Wait, there has
Yeah.
to have been a Modern Warfare 2 because it's Modern Warfare 3.
Yeah. Two of them both done by Sarah Schachner.
Yeah. It's so long. I mean, I love her music. I love every score she's ever
great,
done.
yeah.
Especially Anthem, I think, is my favorite of hers.
Oh yeah, I played that game.
Yeah. It's so good. Yeah. I think musically, I think her Modern Warfare 1 is my favorite of the Call of Duties, the recent ones. But in terms of the game, Black Ops Cold War was so cool. And remember, I only play these single player. I don't really play the multiplayer in Call of Duty. I only play for the campaigns. Black Ops Cold War has one of the coolest campaigns I've ever played. And Jack Wall absolutely knocked it out of the park in terms of the music itself. That very highly recommended. It's like so cool. That's why it's hard for me to remember the Modern Warfares, because Black Ops Cold War has like occupied all of my memory space, and like just the weird random stuff that happens and all of the cool. I don't want to spoil things, so I won't go into details, but like there's a lot. If you haven't played it, there's a lot more than what it seems in a really
I'll
cool
play
way.
that game.
Very great. Yeah. So you know what I mean? It's like really cool narrative storytelling.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about it. I think World War II, I might be mistaken, but is the most melodic modern Call of Duty, because I think after Modern Warfare 1, the recent one, they rebooted the franchise, but they're mostly focused on the sound, and the music is more of like a rhythm behind. But when I think about World War II, it was such a memorable theme it had, and I think they changed the kind of like the approach towards sound and music and that. Do they ask you did they ever ask you on a project like, this game is more focused on sound, try not to occupy a lot of frequencies and attention?
If anyone would say that, it would actually be me, which I did in Call of Duty World War II. They don't usually say, I mean, films, they'll do this, but in video games, they don't usually say don't have melody or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's just usually a creative decision, which is, in my opinion, totally valid. Like, and I wouldn't even say, I mean, there's a Modern Warfare melody that Sarah uses quite frequently.
Yeah.
Same with Black Ops Cold War. That's actually the only Black Ops game that I've played so far.
Yeah.
But it had quite a nice main theme there as well. It's just that I guess the World War II melody, I just use it very, very frequently throughout the game. And the reason I could get away with that is because it's World War II, right? So I knew that the weapons would be all ballistic and we'd have explosions. And so I just said, all right, well, I'm not going to do any like snare drums or mallets or orchestral cymbals, because that would be a little too close to what the sound design is going to be. A snare drum and a gunshot are basically the same sound if you think about it. So I just took all of that out of the orchestra. I actually took out all the high brass and high woodwinds as well, because I wanted that space for like UI and anything else that needed. Sound designers love that range. So I was like, I don't want to get in your way. And when I was writing the score, I would finish like an action cue, but then I would play it alongside some footage of another Call of Duty game, like really intense action footage of, I forget which one, but one of the PlayStation 2 Call of Duty games. And if ever I heard something from my music that like popped out too much, I would just take it out. Or if there was an element in my music that didn't, like you just couldn't hear it at all, it was just being obscured, I would take that out too. So it's actually very stripped down intentionally so that it could just like fit like a glove with the worst case scenario sound design.
Yeah.
And so once I've delivered that, they were able to turn the volume up quite a lot. Like the music is actually very hot in that score, but they could do it because it always kind of fit with the sound design because of that process. So that could be why people think that the melody is prominent. It's because like of all this preparation, they were able to turn off the volume.
Smart. And you also done Call of Duty Mobile, right?
I did 2 of the seasons. Yeah.
So how different was that, working on aiming for small speakers? Though a lot of people play it with headphones, but
yeah, I didn't actually funny story. I never really thought about it that way. I didn't, anytime I've done mobile games, I never really thought, maybe this is just me being a bad composer. I don't know, but I
No.
never really thought of, I never thought of like, oh, it has to sound good on this tiny speaker. Cause like, I just feel like if you cared, then you'd use headphones, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
if you have it just blasting, then I don't know, maybe you're on a bus or something or whatever, like you're not really going to listen. Um, so yeah, I just wrote music, it's all live orchestra recorded.
Wow.
Tencent shelled out the money for full live orchestra recording, which is great. Um, on the first one, they wanted something that harkened back to World War II, and they were very adamant, like, we really want snare drums. Like they loved snare drums. And I was like, well,
Trust me.
it's not going to play during the gameplay, so it's fine. It's just for the menu, so I can have it. Um, and I had certain other things, like I think there's trumpets and woodwinds, high woodwinds in it as well, where it's like I wouldn't have done this in the console game, but since this is just for the menus and stuff, it's like, it'll be fine. And I just kind of I just put in a lot of ideas that I had for the console game that they probably wouldn't have let me do it. And so this was a little bit more liberating, because like they're less kind of hands-on as the Sony PlayStation team was, and like you can't do this, you can't do that. So I was just like, I can do whatever. And then the second one was In Deep Water was the season name, and that one was more of like a hybrid score. So like I had electronics. I used like this Arteria Mini Brute 2 over here to get like bass lines and some other big epic stuff. I hired John Ashaloo, who is a brilliant composer and synth designer. He's worked on a lot of the Transformers movies, and a lot of scores for Lorne Balfe. And I hired him to do about half of the soundtrack as well. And we collaborated on this one track where I wrote like the main orchestral thing just for fun. I was like, hey, I wrote this orchestral thing. Can you just give me some sounds that might work for that? And he's like, bet. And just sent me all of this cool stuff that then I kind of edited down and made it work for that. So that was a lot of fun. These scores come together lightning fast. I mean, it's truly preposterous. Like 1 week tops for both. 1 week. And so it's like in that 1 week, you need like a main theme, a secondary theme, and some other stuff. And it has to be like full live orchestra, orchestrated, like the whole thing, all in 1 week from when you get the call too, by the way. It's not like 1 week and then you have time to like think and like, no, you have to like have some kind of an idea that night, basically. And it has to get approved by like Wednesday. So you have like 1 day basically to write the theme, which is, I don't know how I pulled it off. I'm sure that there's some composers who can write super quickly. I'm not necessarily that, but it worked out.
Sure it did. Yeah, sure it did. So yeah, this was amazing, Will. Everyone knows about your fresh and extraordinary music. We all know what a great composer you are, but knowing you beyond your music, I gotta say you're an even greater man than your work. Your kindness and passion are an amazing symphony from your soul, sir. Thank you again for your time.
For sure, yeah.